Hat was tapped to do the operating system for the little guy. And as most of Red Hat's operating systems, they're all based on Fedora. This laptop is a lot closer to Fedora than most things. Only a few packages have actually been forked for the OLPC project, and a few packages have been added on top. And we'll get to that a little bit later, but first, what I want to do is play a couple of videos for you that were done, because they can do a much better job of getting you involved in it than most folks, or than myself. Pardon me while I fight with OpenOffice.
Center, which is located right in the middle of Kendall Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But really, this is sort of the heart of One Laptop per Child. This is where everybody comes together to meet. This is where we have our country meetings. It's where a lot of the software developers work, practically live. It's really the heartbeat of the organization.
The goal of One Laptop per Child is to use a laptop as a vehicle to transform education in the developing world. The vehicle is
the quality gets really bad if I do that.
Priced down to $100. All of a sudden, you hit the textbook budget of your average developing world country.
People simply couldn't do it, and in record time, we got these. We didn't just get prototypes out the door. We got these things on machines and actually working. My name is John Palmieri. People know me as J5 Red Hat. I work on the OLPC team and
yeah, it's fun. I haven't seen anybody who doesn't gravitate towards this machine. It takes a little bit of the pain out of travel, because you always have such a fun time going through security lines at the airport, taking out your laptop. So you take out a half a dozen of these little green machines, and people say, "That's a $100 laptop." I mean, they pretty much recognize it now. My name's still Baltimore. And I work at One Laptop per Child. I guess my official title is President of Software and Content. Whatever that means. Can we transplant the culture of open source software development, which is all about collaboration, critique, and the tools of collaboration and critique as well, and get the education industry to adopt them? The design of the laptops is a really interesting project, because while it is geared towards a lot of individuals who haven't had experience working with computers, it's also designed in such a way that trying to do a lot of new things that haven't really been done before. I'm Evan Eliason. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon University with degrees in art and computer science. I began in New York working with the Pentagram design team, where I worked on UI design and some interaction design for the laptops.
I'm trying to persuade my other half that they're like shoes, and I should be allowed as many computers in the house as she has pairs of shoes. It's a tough sell. I'm back with House. I work for Red Hat on the OLPC project. Was transferred on projects a year and a half, 2 years ago, I think. I spent a lot of time working directly with the hardware guys, making sure everything works, making sure the physical things work, the screen and the keyboard and the battery charging and everything like that.
I remember one large computer manufacturer
having a pool to get out, have more opportunities that they don't often have. And so it's a wonderful thing to imagine, and I hope that it comes to truth. Hi, my name is Marcelo Tosaci, and I live in Brazil, and I work for Red Hat. I have been working in the project for 6-7 months, and I am developing the driver for the wireless interface and working on the mesh network.
You know, normally the concept of giving kids computers is sort of you set up a computer lab with a bunch of Windows machines and sort of leave it at that. You know, there's just so many really interesting problems, things like not having reliable sources of electricity or not having reliable internet infrastructure, and you know, at the end of the day, it means that millions and millions of kids are going to get access to knowledge and tools that they never could have had before.
For the project, and this next video takes us a little bit more in depth with the people who actually work on it.
Well, we wanted an activity to be about like doing things. You know, I mean, applications are about doing things too, but part of the reason was to kind of break the expectation of, you know, what people thought an application was. Because when you think application, we have a very well-defined idea of what that is. It's Photoshop, it's, you know, instant messaging, it's a game or something like that. And you know, we kind of wanted to break that expectation that, you know, this is what something you run is. What it's supposed to be is we want it to be much more of an interactive thing with other kids. We want it to be a lot about, you know, who you're working with at the time. Things don't have to be shared, activities don't have to be shared, but we want all activities to have the capability of being shared with other people.
If you want to be able to join an activity with somebody else, you need that program, right? You need to be able to interact with them using that program. If you join an activity for which you do not have the source code for that activity, you download it, you install it on your computer, and it runs it for you, and you're able to do something.
It's crazy, like if some kid has a ball and you can't play with them because you can't share that ball, it would be crazy to not be able to share the applications or the games that they're playing so that you can play with them or interact with them. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 in our current build. They're going to be the base apps that are going to go on, and then what countries are going to do is add apps, take away apps that they think are right for their cultures, because one size doesn't fit all.
And there's 2 sets of tools that we have on the laptop. One set of tools are tools for exploring. So we've got a web browser, we've got email and chat and things like that. And then there's tools for expressing. So we've got the camera, we've got word processing, we've got musical composition tools, things like that.
I know one of the things when I grew up was we used to use a paint program called Dazzle Draw. Very similar to this, just draw lines all over the place. Kids really like to do visual stuff. This is TM2, the music app, which is first Microsoft. And mostly it's the first one that kids go to and actually stick with for a long time because it's the fun one. Music is very mathematical. It's been shown that the you know, kids who are very good at math are very good at music also. So it's just another aspect of learning. They can put together scales and make things sound nice. Their brain's working to translate that creativeness to other aspects of their lives too. It was more of a case of, you know, let's start from scratch. Like, how do we want kids to work with these machines? So that was one of the first things that we were thinking about was how can we build the sharing and the communication directly into the software that the children use on these machines.
Children can discover what's inside of it or outside of it to each other themselves and explore. And kids will.
a little bit about why OLPC exists and what we're trying to do with it. We, as I guess a cultured environment or a cultured country, we take a lot more for granted than most people can understand. Ask yourself a couple questions. Have you ever lived in a town without a library? Have you ever lived without a telephone? Have you ever lived without electricity? Do you think you could be where you are today with all of those compiled together and never have any opportunity to experience any of that? Americans or as Europeans, we have such a wealth of information. We have such ready access to enormous amounts of culture, information, news, world events, things that people couldn't possibly comprehend if they'd never experienced it before. This will bring these things to developing countries. This will open doors, open minds, and enable citizens, enable people to bring themselves above the level of poverty. It'll allow them to become an intelligent nation. It'll allow them to make intelligent choices about how their country is ran. It'll be a textbook. It has an ebook reader. It'll be a library with things like Wikipedia, the MIT OpenCourseWare, all of these things that are available on the internet, which a lot of us take for granted, will entirely change the way people think about the world. It'll be a telephone. These can mesh to other ones of these. People who have to spend their entire day working in the field or their entire day doing whatever, they never get to talk to their neighbor. They never get to talk to their friend down the road. These things will be able to communicate with each other with video, with sound, and bring communities closer together. It'll be a camera. Take a picture of what's going on, send it down the road. It'll be an orchestra. There are tools on here to compose music. It'll be networked. Not only can it join wireless access points, which I doubt you're going to find in many places, but they'll mesh together and create their own network and their own way of sharing things with each other. It will be human-powered. There's no electricity to a lot of places. Many of you have first heard of the hand crank. That idea was not so great. It put a lot of stress on the casing. The expended energy with holding it down and cranking it to not generate enough into the battery. The working idea now is that there's going to be a pulley, like a pull start, like your lawnmower. The energy transfer is much better, and a neat idea is to belt that onto your waist, tie the string to your foot, walk down the road, and you'll charge it as you walk. It will be an opportunity. Bringing all these things to countries that have never seen it before, it's a really cool idea. And as has been said many times before, it's an education project, not a laptop project. So what are some of the things that people say about this? Some of the people that don't like it, some people that are scared about it, some people that just don't understand it. This is a pretty common one. Seems alright on the top. Think about that for a second. This is the one that makes me laugh a lot. So, how many of you learned the majority of your computer skills in a classroom?
You mean in a classroom where that was the subject?
Exactly. Take this further. The skills that you use today in your jobs, how much of it did you learn in a structured classroom being led by an instructor? How much of it did you learn on your own with access to the internet, trying to learn something that interested you that nobody was around to teach you about. There's a lot of hands. There's a lot of hands. Ownership is everything with this. These do not sit in the classroom. These do not sit unused waiting for the kids to come in the next day, if they can come in the next day, if they're even available to come in. These go home with the children at night. In many cases, they're the only source of light for a family. When you give ownership of these to a child or to a family, they take far better care of it than they ever would a piece of equipment that's run by the school, that may be run by a government that they don't agree with. Yeah, well, it costs a little bit more than $100. So what? So what? It's worth it. As more and more countries sign up, and as we start distributing millions and millions of these, the price will come down. It's going to have to. Yes?
Well, how much does it cost right now?
The current figure is about $175. And that's, the first run. We haven't done a massive run of fully developed units for a country.
And how much of that is completely new technology that nothing else has?
A fair amount of it. Yeah. So for $175, you get a fair amount of brand new technology nobody's ever used before, going to emerging countries.
And the big ones there are the mesh network and the display.
The display.
And the low power consumption. It uses like
lots of low power consumption.
And the battery watts.
Yep. Much of the new things in this are how much of the computer can work independently of the processor. The processor can shut itself down, and other things will continue to operate. Saves a tremendous amount of power. That's not something a lot of people are thinking of. OldPCnews.com has lots and lots of good information, lots of debunking, lots of laughs. So getting to what's inside this little guy. We're building the hardware. We're building the software for the hardware. We can do certain things with it that we couldn't do out in the normal world. Think of Apple. Think of what they've been able to do for their constrained hardware set. Yes.
I was wondering, has anybody else come up to you guys about trying to use your same screen technology?
I honestly don't know. I don't get involved too much with the hardware side of it. I can't imagine that people would not want to. If we want, towards the end of the presentation, we can all go walk outside and see how this thing looks in the sun. It's very, very impressive.
Can you explain, I keep hearing this screen technology stuff, can you explain that?
Have you ever taken a laptop out in the sun and realized that you can't read it at all? The more sunlight that hits this, the higher the contrast. The better you can read it. You drop it into black and white mode, it kills the backlight. Guess what? That saves a whole lot of battery. You use the sun to light your display. You can sit there and read an entire book and never hit the processor. The obligatory hardware specs. This processor is actually going to change slightly. We're getting a different geode, which is a little bit faster, has a little bit more cache, takes less power, gets things done faster.
But it's not a computer.
No, it is not.
What does MID?
Megabyte. 128 megabytes of RAM, 512 megabytes of flash storage. No moving parts. Yes?
Didn't I read that they doubled those? That it's now 256 megabytes of RAM?
It might be. I don't believe it is in the unit that I'm carrying. They may raise depending on if they can get them cheap enough and fast enough and consume enough less power. I am working from a slightly lower presentation. That could be possible. Camera and mic is built in. You can see the little hole right here. We'll load up the camera so everybody can see themselves.
What kind of camera is
That I couldn't tell you. I can tell you that at Guadec, the big convention, these were passed around. A lot of people were playing with them. People were teleconferencing with these. Grabbed some software, installed it, were using it to conference over the wireless video-wise, and they handled it just fine. The mousing surface, in this particular unit, only the middle is working, but in the final production unit, the entire bottom part is a touch pad as well as a stylus pad, allow children to write as well as mouse. Does that, which is kind of cool. Has buttons on the front for playing games, reading, doing whatever. The keyboard has a membrane over it. You can drop all kinds of water, sit in the rain with it, it's fine. It's sturdy. We lost one of these to baggage handling for probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks. Came back unscathed, which is not bad. And you can imagine, as various checkpoints looked in the bag and saw something like this, somebody had to pull it and look at it. So what is Sugar? Sugar is the desktop interface, but it's not GNOME, it's not KDE, it's not your typical desktop. Sugar your desktop is your neighborhood. If I were joined to a wireless point or a mesh network, I would see all my little buddies sitting here. I would see what applications my little buddies are using. I could join in those applications with my buddies, or I could start an application on my own, or an activity, I should say. The menu bar is the frame. Different views of your world, different activities you can do. The hierarchical file system is somewhat replaced by a running journal. We want the children to know not just what they've stored, but a running log of what they've done, what they've experienced with their laptop, what they've experienced with their friends. It's like a blog, it's like a history, it's like a file system. Applications are activities. We don't necessarily want children to think of things as, in computer terms, as an activity or a program or anything like that. It's something to do. It's an activity. It's just a tool. Nouns or verbs. We want actions. We don't want descriptions. The neighborhood, as I showed you, you can also see a list of neighborhoods, i.e. internet connection points or the mesh network. The frame, different views of your world, your list of activities that are running, as well as a list of activities that you can launch or participate in. This is a slightly older build. There's a few more activities now. The journal, as I said, is a running log of what you've experienced or what you've experienced with your friends. You can go back a few days and see what you were doing, restart an activity, add comments to it. Right now, the activities we list here, we have a paint program, block parties to show what a game would look like, a slideshow to look at your pictures that you've taken, a writing application to jot down notes or something. You can collaborate on a report with your friends, write a note to your teacher, write a note to your friends. A newsreader, RSS feeds. Pretty simple idea. eToys is this wonderful suite of development tools to create educational activities for children. This is sort of the framework that we want countries to work with. The idea is that we have a base set of activities that we ship on the operating system. Countries who purchase these for their children can use things like eToys and can use things like the Sugar API to create their own activities for their country. So how can you help? And why should you help? Beta hardware, pre-alpha software needs lots of testing, right? Needs lots of looking at. The first step to get involved is to join the sugar community. There is a very active IRC channel on Freenode. There's a mailing list. You can actually run sugar on your own laptop. Don't have to have one of these. wiki.laptop.org, or all you have to remember is just laptop.org, and you can get to it from there. There's some very good instructions.
VMware images?
Yes, there are, which could also be run with other virtualization tools. There's a tutorial for building an activity. It's pretty simple, works pretty well. I've seen non-developers create an activity in a short amount of time, improving the tutorial as they went. If your application or activity is a neat idea, a lot of people like it, it can become an XO activity. You've just contributed to the world. You could also give money. Everybody likes money. But your time and effort is obviously far more valuable. Anybody can fix a bug. Can you help origination? That's the end of the slideshow. I'm probably a little early on time because it was quick. If anybody would like to come up, play with the little guy, we can go outside, play with it in the sun. Any questions?
Maybe cover